Part 1. Morning like any other. At 6:42 a.m., Marko Hrtsenko woke up because his phone vibrated against the wooden nightstand. Not rang, just vibrated, persistent and irritating, like an insect trapped under glass. He didn't open his eyes immediately. For a few seconds, he lay still, staring into the darkness behind his eyelids, listening to the apartment breathe. The old pipes ticked somewhere in the walls. A tram passed in the distance, metal wheels shrieking softly, as if complaining about having to exist so early. Another vibration. Marko exhaled through his nose and reached for the phone. Unknown number. He frowned. It was too early for scams, too early for work, too early for anyone who knew him well enough to call. He silenced the phone without answering and rolled onto his side. Today mattered. That was the thought that had pulled him out of sleep even before the phone. Today he would drive to Lviv. Not for work, not for family, not even for money. For a signature. One piece of paper, one official stamp, and the last 3 years of his life would finally close like a finished chapter. Or so he hoped. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face with both hands until the stiffness faded. 36 years old, he thought, and already tired in the bones like someone twice that age. The apartment was small but clean, one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, a bathroom where the light flickered if you didn't flip the switch just right. A place you lived in temporarily, even if temporary stretched into years. Marko stood, stretched his back, and walked to the window. Kiev was waking up. Below, the street glistened from rain that had fallen sometime during the night. Cars moved cautiously, headlights still on, drivers half asleep. A woman walked her dog in a thick coat, shoulders hunched, breath visible in the cold air. October. He checked the weather on his phone. Cloudy. Possible rain. Wind from the west. Perfect, he muttered. He dressed simply. Jeans, dark sweater, jacket with a zipper that never stayed fully closed. In the kitchen, he poured water into the kettle and leaned against the counter while it heated. The phone vibrated again. Same unknown number. This time, he stared at it. A normal person would ignore it again. A cautious person might block it. But something about the timing, something about the way the vibration felt heavier than before, made him hesitate. He answered. Hello. For a moment, there was only breathing. Not static. Not silence. Actual breathing. Then a man's voice said, calm and controlled. Marko Hrtsenko. You're planning to leave the city today. Marko straightened. Who is this? A pause. Just long enough to feel deliberate. Someone who needs you to slow down. I don't know you. Marko said, his voice firmer than he felt. If this is some kind of joke. This isn't a joke. You'll be on the road by 8. Gray Skoda Octavia. License plate ending in 417. Marko's stomach tightened. He didn't answer. You'll stop for fuel near Zhytomyr, the voice continued. You always do. You'll buy bad coffee and regret it. And if you keep going after that, someone will get hurt. The kettle clicked off behind him, loud in the sudden silence. Who are you? Marko asked again, quieter now. I'm giving you a chance to stay home. The call ended. Marko stared at the phone until the screen went dark. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he laughed. Once, short and sharp. Idiots, he said to the empty kitchen. Scams were getting creative. Data leaks, tracking apps, social engineering. It wasn't impossible. He worked in logistics. His information wasn't exactly classified. Still, the license plate. He poured the hot water over instant coffee, spilling a little on the counter. His hand trembled slightly. He noticed it and forced it still. You're tired. That's all. He drank the coffee without tasting it and checked his car keys, right where he always left them. At 7:55, he locked the apartment door behind him. The stairwell smelled faintly of dust and old paint. Outside, the air was colder than he expected. He zipped his jacket fully this time. The Skoda waited at the curb, gray and unremarkable, rain spots still drying on the hood. Marko opened the driver's door and paused. For just a second, he considered going back upstairs. Then he shook his head, got in, and started the engine. As he pulled away from the curb, his phone buzzed once more. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a message. You still have time to turn around. Marko didn't respond. He merged into traffic, heading west, unaware that the most ordinary decision of his life, to keep driving, had already set something irreversible in motion. Part 2. The first signs. The city let him go reluctantly. Kiev always did. Traffic thickened near the ring road. a sluggish river of metal and impatience. Marco tapped the steering wheel with his fingers, eyes moving automatically, mirrors, speedometer, brake lights ahead. Driving was the one thing his body still did without thinking. The message stayed on his phone like a weight in his pocket. You still have time to turn around. He didn't delete it. He didn't reply. He just turned the music up a little louder, an old radio station playing something forgettable, and focused on the road. By the time the buildings thinned into warehouses and long fences, his breathing had slowed. The familiar stretch of highway opened ahead, gray asphalt cutting through fields already fading into autumn brown. Normal. Completely normal. That was the dangerous thing about it. At 8:37 a.m., he passed the first sign for Zitomir. At 8:39, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a different number. He ignored it. The buzzing stopped, then started again. Then again, 3 short vibrations, a pause, 3 more. Marco cursed under his breath and answered through the car's hands-free system. Yes. You're still driving, the same voice said. Marco gripped the steering wheel. I told you not to call me again. You don't mean that. Listen carefully, Marco said. If you're threatening me, you should know I've already. This isn't about you, the man interrupted. That's what you don't understand yet. A truck thundered past in the opposite lane, rocking Marco's car slightly. What do you want? Marco asked. For you to stop at the next rest area. Not the fuel station. The small one after it. I'm not taking directions from a stranger. Then don't, the voice said calmly. But if you stop for fuel like you always do, you'll see the red van. Marco's heart skipped. What red van? You'll know it when you see it. The call ended again, clean, abrupt. Marco slowed slightly, anger bubbling under his ribs. This was harassment. Stalking, even. Someone was messing with him, and the worst part was how precisely they knew his habits. He did always stop at that station. Same one, every time. Habit was comfort. The fuel gauge dipped below half. He told himself he wouldn't stop. 10 minutes later, the sign appeared. Fuel, 1 kilometer. He passed it. The road stretched ahead, empty and flat. Wind nudged the car gently from the side. The sky pressed low and gray, like it was leaning in to watch. 5 minutes passed. The fuel gauge slid closer to the warning line. Of course, Marco muttered. He'd meant to fill up the night before. He hadn't. The engine didn't sputter. Not yet. The next sign came into view. Rest area, 500 m. Not the fuel station. The small one. Marco slowed despite himself. He told himself it was practical. A bathroom break. Stretch his legs. Nothing more. The rest area was nearly empty. Just a few parking spaces, a wooden table, trees shedding yellow leaves. No building. No cameras that he could see. He parked and turned off the engine. The silence pressed in. When he opened the door, the cold air smelled of wet earth and leaves. Somewhere, a bird called sharply, then fell silent. Marco walked a few steps away from the car and scanned the road. Nothing. No red van. No people. You see, he said aloud, feeling foolish. Nothing. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. He answered immediately. I'm here, he said. Where's your van? You did well, the voice replied. Now listen. I'm done listening. No, you're just starting. Walk to the edge of the trees. Marco hesitated. Why? Because someone else is already listening. A chill ran through him. He turned slowly, scanning the rest area again. The empty parking spaces. The road. The tree line. Don't turn around, the voice said softly. Just walk. Marco swallowed. Every instinct told him to get back in the car and drive. But another instinct, the one that had kept him alive through worse things than this, told him that whoever was on the phone was controlling the situation. He took a step, then another. Leaves crunched under his shoes. The wind moved the branches overhead, whispering. Good, the voice said. Now stay still. Marco stopped. What is this? He asked. An intersection, the man replied. You just don't see the roads yet. A distant engine sound drifted toward them. From the highway. Here it comes, the voice said. Marco's pulse pounded in his ears. What comes? The sound grew louder. And then he saw it. A red van, old and dirty, slowed as it passed the rest area entrance. It didn't stop. But as it went by, Marco caught a glimpse through the side window. 2 figures. One of them was struggling. The van disappeared down the road. Marco's breath caught. Who was that? He whispered. The voice on the phone answered quietly. Someone you've never met. Someone you were about to pass without knowing. Part 3. The choice that locks the door. Marco stood frozen at the edge of the trees, his phone pressed so tightly to his ear that it hurt. "Call the police," he said. "Right now." "They won't get there in time," the voice replied. "And neither will you, unless you do exactly what I say." Marco turned back toward the road despite the warning. The red van was already gone, swallowed by distance and gray air. "You staged that," Marco said. "You and your friends." "You saw the struggle," the man interrupted. "You know what you saw." Marco's mouth went dry. He had a flash of movement, an arm, a head forced down. Panic doesn't look theatrical. It looks messy, real. "What do you want from me?" Marco asked. "I want you to follow them." Silence fell between them, heavy as wet concrete. "That's insane," Marco said finally. "I don't even know where they're going." "You will," the voice said. "Because they'll stop soon. They always do." Marco laughed, sharp and broken. "You talk like this happens often." "It does." The words settled deep. Marco looked at his car. Safe. Familiar. Leaving was still an option. So was pretending none of this had happened. But the image of the van window replayed itself in his mind. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you were going to be there anyway," the voice replied. "Because you're not afraid of driving long distances. Because you've already lost enough that you won't look away." Marco flinched. "That wasn't public information." "You looked me up," he said. "Yes." "To scare me." "No," the man said. "To understand what you would do." The phone crackled slightly, like a bad connection. "Get in your car," the voice said. "You have 3 minutes before you lose them completely." Marco stood there for another long second. Then he turned and ran. The engine started on the first try. He pulled out of the rest area too fast, tires spitting gravel. As he merged back onto the highway, he scanned the road ahead, heart hammering. Nothing. No red van. "Where?" he demanded. "Stay in the right lane," the voice said. "Speed up." Marco obeyed. Traffic was light now. Fields rolled past, broken by clusters of trees and the occasional roadside cafe. The sky darkened, clouds thickening like bruises. "There," the voice said suddenly. 2 kilometers ahead. "See the bridge." Marco squinted. He saw it, a low concrete overpass crossing the highway. "And the exit just before it?" "Yes." "They'll take it." "They?" "The driver and the man in the passenger seat." Marco's hands were slick with sweat. "And the person in the back?" he asked. A pause. "That depends on you." The exit came up fast. Marco signaled and turned off the highway, the road narrowing instantly. The surface changed, rougher, patched. Trees closed in on both sides. The red van sat ahead, pulled halfway onto the shoulder. Marco slowed. "They stopped," he said. "Yes," the voice replied. "They think no one followed them." Marco parked a short distance away, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break his ribs. "What now?" he whispered. "You don't confront them," the voice said. "You observe." "I'm not a spy." "You don't need to be. Just tell me what you see." The van's rear doors opened. 2 men stepped out. One was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. The other was shorter, nervous. He kept looking around, shifting his weight. They opened the back. Marco's breath caught. A young woman sat inside, hands bound, mouth covered with tape. Her eyes were wide, wild. "She's alive," Marco said urgently. "Yes." "She's terrified." "Yes." The tall man said something Marco couldn't hear. The shorter one laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "They're moving her," Marco said. "Taking her somewhere else." "Good," the voice replied. "That means you still have time." "Time for what?" The men closed the doors and climbed back into the van. The engine started. "They're leaving," Marco said. "Follow them," the voice commanded. "But not too close." Marco pulled back onto the road. The chase was nothing like the movies. No sirens. No screeching tires. Just 2 vehicles moving through an increasingly empty landscape, pretending nothing was wrong. Rain began to fall, at first lightly, then harder, streaking across the windshield, blurring the world into gray motion. "Why aren't you calling the police?" Marco asked between breaths. "Because if I do, they disappear," the man replied. "They've done it before." "Who are you?" Marco demanded. Another pause. "Someone who failed once." The van turned suddenly onto a narrower road. "Careful," the voice said. "This is where it gets dangerous." Marco followed. The asphalt ended. Dirt and mud took over. Trees pressed close now, branches scraping lightly against the sides of the cars. "Where are we?" Marco asked. "Not on any map you trust," the voice replied. Ahead, the red van slowed, then stopped. The brake lights glowed red through the rain. Marco's stomach dropped. They know, he whispered. Yes, the voice said. Now you have to decide something. The line went quiet. Decide what? Marco asked. But the call had ended. The red van's driver door opened. A man stepped out and started walking toward Marco's car. Part 4. No way to reverse. The man walked slowly. Not angry. Not rushed. That was what scared Marco the most. Rain drummed steadily on the roof of the Skoda, the wipers moving back and forth like nervous hands. Marco's foot hovered over the accelerator, then the brake, then neither. Any sudden move would be a signal. The man stopped a few meters away. He was older than Marco had expected. Late 40s, maybe. A face shaped by years of not caring whether people liked him or not. His jacket was unzipped despite the rain. He raised one hand, palm open. Relax, he called out. You're lost. Marco cracked his window just enough to hear him clearly. I was turning around, Marco said, forcing calm into his voice. Wrong road. The man smiled faintly. No one takes this road by accident. Behind him, the van idled. The second man remained inside. Marco could see movement through the fogged rear window. The woman. I'll turn around now, Marco said. The man leaned closer, peering into the car. You won't, he said softly. You followed us. Marco's phone vibrated. The voice returned, low and urgent in his ear. Don't look at your phone. Marco didn't. Do you have a problem? The man asked. No, Marco said. Just tired. Then you should go home. The man's gaze dropped, just briefly, to the passenger seat. Empty. His eyes narrowed. You alone? Yes. A lie. Not entirely. The man straightened and took a step back. Turn off the engine, he said. Marco didn't move. The rain grew heavier. You don't want trouble, the man said, his tone changing. Hardening. I already have trouble, Marco replied before he could stop himself. The man studied him. Then he nodded once. All right, he said. Then step out. The voice in Marco's ear whispered. Now. Marco slammed the accelerator. The Skoda lurched forward. The man swore and jumped aside as the car tore past him, spraying mud. Marco didn't look back. He followed the curve of the road blindly, heart pounding, hands locked on the wheel. Branches whipped against the windshield. The road narrowed further, twisting through dense trees. Visibility dropped. Mud sucked at the tires. Slow down, the voice warned. You'll lose control. They're behind me, Marco shouted. I know. Headlights flared in the rearview mirror. The van. It accelerated faster than Marco expected, closing the distance. They know this road better, the voice said. But you have one advantage. What? You're scared. A fallen branch lay across part of the road. Marco swerved at the last second, barely missing it. The van plowed through, branches cracking under its weight. The road dipped sharply. Bridge ahead, the voice said. Old. Narrow. Marco saw it just in time. A wooden bridge spanning a shallow ravine, rainwater rushing below. No guardrails, the voice added. The van gained on him. Go, the voice said. Marco hit the bridge at speed. The wood groaned under the tires, planks slick and uneven. The Skoda fishtailed, then straightened. He didn't slow. Halfway across, something struck the side of his car. Metal screamed. The Skoda jolted violently. Marco fought the wheel, barely keeping the car from sliding off into the ravine. He made it across. Barely. He slammed the brakes once he was on solid ground again. The car spun, skidding sideways, then stopped. He turned, breath ragged. The bridge behind him was empty. No van. The rain fell harder, filling the silence. Where are they? Marco whispered. The voice returned, quiet. They didn't follow. Marco laughed weakly. They gave up. No, the man said. They couldn't. Why not? Because the bridge can't hold that van's weight. Marco's laughter died. A distant sound rose over the rain. Wood cracking. Then, a deep, hollow crash. The sound echoed through the trees, then faded. Marco stared at the bridge, understanding dawning slowly and horribly. Oh God, he whispered. The voice stayed silent. Seconds passed. Minutes. Finally, the voice spoke. They're alive, the man said. At least 2 of them. The woman. Marco asked urgently. A pause. Yes. For now. Marco slumped back in his seat, shaking. Now what? He asked. Now. The voice replied. You don't leave. Part 5. Staying. Marco turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt wrong, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Rain slid down the windshield in uneven streams. Somewhere behind the trees, water rushed through the ravine, louder now. The smell of wet leaves and hot metal crept into the car. "You want me to just sit here?" Marco asked. "No," the voice replied. "I want you to walk back." Marco's heart lurched. "Back to the bridge?" "Yes." "They could be armed." "They are." Marco closed his eyes briefly. "You said staying," he said. "Not volunteering to die." "You're not a hero," the man said. "That's why this works. You'll be careful." Marco laughed quietly, bitterly. "That's the plan." "Yes." He opened the door. Cold rain soaked his jacket instantly. His shoes sank slightly into the mud as he stepped out. Each step toward the bridge felt heavier than the last, as if the forest were pushing back. The bridge came into view through the rain. Part of it had collapsed inward. Broken planks jutted at sharp angles. One side sagged dangerously. Marco approached slowly, scanning everything. "Do you see the van?" the voice asked. "Yes." It lay tilted in the ravine below, nose down, rear end wedged against the far bank. Water rushed around it, brown and fast. "Smoke?" the voice asked. "No." "Movement?" Marco squinted. The driver's side door was open. A figure moved, slowly, pulling himself up against the mud. "One of them's alive," Marco said. "I know. What about the woman?" "She's still inside." Marco's stomach clenched. "She'll drown." "Not yet," the voice said. "The water's rising slowly. You have time." "I didn't sign up for this," Marco said. "No," the voice replied softly. "You were signed up." Marco inched closer to the ravine's edge. The man from earlier, tall, broad-shouldered, looked up and saw him. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. Then the man shouted something Marco couldn't hear and reached into his jacket. "Gun," the voice said instantly. "Get down." Marco dropped flat, heart slamming into the mud as a shot cracked through the air. The sound echoed violently between the trees. The bullet hit wood, splintering a plank inches from where Marco had been standing. "Stay low," the voice instructed. "He can't climb fast." Another shot. Closer. Marco crawled backward, breath ragged. "I'm not trained for this," he hissed. "Neither was I," the man replied. The first time, Marco ducked behind a thick tree trunk. Bark exploded as another bullet struck. "You said I have time," Marco shouted. "You do," the voice said. "But not much." The sound of metal groaning drifted up from the ravine. The van was shifting. "The woman's panicking," the voice continued. "She's kicking. That's dangerous." "How do you know?" Marco demanded. "I've been listening to this long enough to recognize it." Another gunshot rang out, followed by a shout of frustration. Marco peeked around the tree. The man with the gun was struggling up the muddy slope, slipping, swearing. His movements were clumsy. "Phone," the voice said suddenly. "What?" "Turn your phone on speaker. Put it on the ground." Marco frowned but obeyed, placing the phone screen up in the mud near the tree. "Now step away." Marco moved back, heart pounding. "What are you doing?" he whispered. The phone crackled. Then the voice changed. Louder. Sharper. "Police are on the way," the phone announced in the open air. "They already have your location." The man froze. "What?" he shouted. "Drop the weapon," the phone continued. "Lie face down." Marco's breath caught. It was a recording. The man looked around wildly, panic flashing across his face. He fired once, blindly, then threw the gun into the ravine. "Get down," the voice barked. The man dropped to his knees, then flat, mud coating his clothes. Silence followed, broken only by rain and rushing water. Marco stood there, shaking. "Now what?" he whispered. "Now," the voice said, "you go to the van." Marco's legs felt like they didn't belong to him. He descended carefully, gripping roots and branches. The van loomed closer, water lapping higher against its side. The back doors were bent, but not fully crushed. He reached them and pulled. They didn't open. "Try again," the voice urged. Marco pulled harder, metal screeching. The door gave way. Inside, the woman screamed. "I'm here," Marco shouted. "I'm here to help." Her eyes were wild. Tears streaked her face. She nodded frantically, muffled by the tape. Marco tore it off. "Please," she sobbed. "Please hurry." "I will," he said, hands shaking as he worked at the ropes. The water rose to his ankles, then his calves. "Marco," the voice said quietly. "You have to move." "I am." A sharp crack echoed. The van shifted again. Now, the voice said. The ropes came loose. Marco pulled her toward him. The van lurched violently. They both fell. Water surged in. Gio, the voice shouted. Marco shoved her ahead of him, pushing against the current, lungs burning. They reached the bank just as the van slid fully into the rushing water. It disappeared with a roar. Marco collapsed onto the mud, gasping. The woman collapsed beside him, sobbing uncontrollably. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real ones. Marco laughed weakly, rain mixing with tears he didn't remember starting. It's over, he whispered. The voice didn't answer. Part 6. When the noise fades. The sirens grew louder, then multiplied. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees, reflecting off wet leaves and broken wood. Voices shouted. Boots splashed through mud. Someone wrapped a blanket around the woman's shoulders. Marco sat on the ground, back against a tree, staring at his hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. A paramedic knelt in front of him. Can you hear me? She asked. Marco nodded. Any injuries? I don't think so. She checked his pupils, his pulse, asked his name. He answered automatically, like someone reciting lines he'd practiced long ago. Police officers moved past him toward the ravine. One of them stopped near the man lying face down in the mud, now cuffed and silent. Another officer approached Marco. You were the caller? He asked. Marco blinked. Caller. The one who reported the kidnapping. Marco shook his head slowly. No. I followed them. Someone else. He stopped. Someone else. The officer frowned. Who? Marco pulled out his phone. The call log was empty. No missed calls. No unknown numbers. No messages. The warning text was gone. Marco stared at the screen. That's impossible, he whispered. The officer watched him carefully. Sir, you need to tell me everything you remember. They took statements. Time became elastic, stretching, folding in on itself. Marco told the story from the rest area to the bridge, omitting nothing, even the voice. Especially the voice. Some of the officers exchanged looks. Others wrote quietly. The woman, her name was Alina, sat nearby, wrapped in a thermal blanket, answering questions between sobs. She kept glancing at Marco, as if afraid he might disappear. After nearly an hour, a senior officer approached him. You're free to go, he said. For now. Marco looked up. Free. You saved her life, the officer said. We'll need you again, but you're not under suspicion. About the calls, Marco said quickly. The man who helped me, did you trace him? The officer hesitated. No one else called this in, he said. The report came from a roadside emergency sensor near the bridge. Automatic trigger. Marco stared at him. But the recording, Marco insisted. The voice on my phone. The officer shook his head. There was no recording. Marco said nothing. They drove him back to the highway in silence. The rain had eased into a mist. The sky lightened slightly, as if embarrassed by the violence it had watched. Marco drove aimlessly for a while before pulling into a quiet lay-by and turning off the engine. His hands finally stopped shaking. He sat there, breathing, listening to his own heartbeat. Who were you? He whispered to the empty car. His phone buzzed. Once. A new message appeared. You did better than I did. Marco's breath caught. Who are you? He whispered. Another message followed. Someone who kept driving once. A third message. I don't anymore. Then the phone went dark. No number. No sender. No trace. Marco didn't try to reply. He sat there for a long time, watching the road stretch away in both directions. Finally, he turned the car around. He didn't go to Lviv. He went home. Epilogue. 3 months later, Marco received a letter. No return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about a dismantled trafficking route, multiple arrests across several regions. One sentence was underlined in pen. The investigation began after an anonymous chain of interventions. At the bottom of the page, someone had written, Stop when you can. Stay when you must. Marco folded the paper carefully and placed it in a drawer. Some days, when he drives long distances, his phone vibrates with nothing on the screen. When that happens, he slows down. Just in case.